All right. If there was a restaurant in heaven, what would the restaurant be?
Chick-fil-A, man. That Jesus chicken.
I need a Panera.
Panera, okay?
Chili's.
Chili's, really? All right, cool. What is a food or a restaurant you're hoping for in heaven?
McDonald's.
Pizza.
Taco Bell.
If there's one chore that has to be done while you're in hell, what chore is it?
See, that's not an easy question for me because I love chores. I love doing dishes. I love doing the laundry. Well, I don't know. Cleaning the dishes, man. All that grimy food, no.
Yeah.
No, man.
Scrubbing toilets.
Okay.
Laundry.
Laundry? Yeah, I feel you. What is the first thing that you think you will see when you get to heaven?
Ooh. I will see all of my loved ones that I lost on this earth in heaven. My grandparents, all my animals that I had.
Jesus' feet.
Okay.
And I just can't wait to bow down to his feet.
So I've got to say, just from the pictures, that the throne is there.
Sure.
That's the room. We're all going to hang out
Love it.
a little bit. It's going to be awesome.
All right, let's see. Do you think that God sends people to hell?
Absolutely not. No, God loves us all. We're going to heaven. Once you believe, you're there.
I think it's our choice to follow the Lord.
Sure.
And so he gives us that path and he gives us free will. So I think it's ultimately up to us.
I think we write our own ticket there.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Man, people have some low expectations in heaven. Taco Bell, better known as Taco Hell. That's what we called it. Listen, let me just tell you come to my house after a Taco Bell run, it is not going to be good. I'm just going to tell you, woo, that's the most unbelievable thing I ever heard. Lord help us today. So I'm trying to get past that one. Wasn't the worship great today? Man, it was just powerful. Yeah, man, it was just powerful. I literally was sitting over there and forgot that I was coming up. At the end I was like, I better hurry up and get on out. So my name is Chris Root. For those who don't know me, I'm one of the pastors here on staff and super excited to be here. And we're doing this little 2-week series talking about heaven and hell and who gets in. And so I get to kick it off, and thank goodness I got the heaven one. Yeah, Nate's got hell, which is very fitting for some reason. I don't know why. He seems to be much more of an expert in that topic than I am. So that should be fun next week. I'll probably hear about that. So here's the thing about hell. It's one of the most, heaven. One of the most, still stuck on that one. You can tell I'm contemplating what might come of this. One of the most common thoughts in life is death. Are we going to die? Of course. What's it going to be like? What's going to happen afterwards? And I don't know if you know this, but studies have shown that we as Americans think about death and dying about 3 to 4 times a month. And it's like contemplating. I thought about that. Was it true? And I think about it way more than that, way more than that. It's because I keep messing up and my wife is telling me I'm going to die. So there's a lot of thought. We write songs about it. Did y'all know this? There's a ton of stuff that's written about heaven and hell in general. And, Bob Dylan wrote a song called Knocking on Heaven's Door. Y'all know this one? Y'all do? Yeah. If you're from the 80s, there's only one version of this, right? Guns N' Roses. Knock, knock, knocking on. Anyway. AC/DC. Any AC/DC fans in the house? Yeah, they were obsessed with hell. I can see where your minds are. I'm with you. AC/DC. The worst thing about AC/DC is kids today think it's cool to wear their shirts, but they don't know a single song from AC/DC. Right? Like, take that shirt off. Take it off right now, if you're able. Highway to Hell. That's a great song, sort of. I feel bad about saying that. Hell's Bells, though, come on. That's like classic. Really bad songs. John Lennon got in on it with the song Imagine. He talked about heaven. You have Metallica, Enter Sandman. It's the greatest entrance song of all time for anybody, right? That's a great one. Then the Christians had to get in on it. They're like, hey, this is our territory. Back off, Jack. And then you had Mercy Me step into the ring with I Can Only Imagine. If this song is played one more time, I'm going to die and go to heaven. Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. I hope that song is not true because I am out of shape. I'm not good with the stairs, what I'm trying to tell you. I'm hoping an elevator is going to kick in or an escalator or something I can ride it up. Any Jay-Z fans in the house? Yep, both of y'all are here. Good. Lucifer was his good song. Even Sam Smith got in it at the Grammys. Did you see that nightmare that took place? And I was like, that is scary. I'm a big fan of heaven now because if he is there, I do not want to go. So even the way we talk about heaven, I find to be funny. You know, we use weird words, right, to describe heaven, or we just use phrases. Somehow it's like creeped into our language. And I'm not even sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing sometimes. Like, well, good heavens. Yeah, is that good heavens? I don't know if you're meaning that in a good way or not. That is like manna from heaven. What is manna? What would that even, how do we know if that's a good thing or a bad thing? That stinks to high heaven. That's a weird phrase. It sounds like a marijuana type reference, right? That stinks to high heaven. I'm in hog heaven. I never thought that hogs in heaven would be something I'd want to be a part of. And here's a great one. For heaven's sake, it's all in how you use it. Well, for heaven's sake, come on in. Well, for heaven's sakes, you still haven't cleaned your room? Who knows? What is the point of that one? My favorite of all times is, well, good heavens to Betsy. I don't even know who this lady Betsy is, but she's got something going on. Good heavens to her. It's weird how we use those phrases. So let me ask you a question. You ready? I just want you to think about it. How does thinking about heaven make you feel? So when you think about heaven, how does it make you feel? While you're thinking, let me give you my thoughts about myself. Because I hear people talk about heaven, and sometimes the way they describe it makes me think, I'm not sure I want to go there. You ever, like somebody saying, hey, in heaven, we're going to worship God for eternity. I've been to some Pentecostal churches. It felt like an eternity. All right? It's like over and over that song. Can we, listen, if you sing that verse one more time, I'm out of here. And if they got country music in heaven, I quit. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do it. I know it offended a lot of you. I heard this guy once say, as a pastor, he was describing, he said, when we get to heaven, we're all going to have a mansion. And I'm like, that sounds like a lot of responsibility. I just downsized. I don't want to go back to a big house. Can you imagine who's going to clean that thing? I'm going to be cleaning all the time. And the yard, who's going to clean the yard? I don't even like to cut grass. A mansion sounds like a lot of yard. Needs to be manicured. I'm not excited about that. One time, as a matter of fact, in this video too, you hear this quite a bit. People say, when I get to heaven, I'll get to be with my family for eternity. Man, I'm going to tell you, I could barely make it a few hours on Christmas with some of those guys. I'm just telling you right now, if my uncle shows up in eternity, all I'm telling you right now is I'm going to purgatory because that's going to be like hell for me. There's a lot of play on words in that one right there. So listen, all kidding aside, let's answer that question. Let's think about it. How does thinking about heaven make you feel? Right, we're just messing around a little bit there, but how does it make you feel when you think about heaven? Now, why? Is because how you think about eternity, it really does matter. It impacts a ton of things. And I'm going to kind of get to that. But it impacts a ton of things. And here's something, everybody in this room, here's something you can be sure of. This is a certainty. Ready for this? You're going to die. There is 100% chance you will die. 100%. That's a great way to start a service out, isn't it? Everybody's like, "Whoa, thanks, Chris. I wasn't thinking about it till now." So I wanna think about this. I wanna answer 2 questions today since we're talking about heaven. One, how do you get in heaven? 2, now this one's the one I'm actually really excited about because I think this is the one we sometimes miss. Why do I even want to go to heaven? Why does it even matter? What is that all about? Which is why I kind of did the little joke earlier. So let's jump in. Let's get started with the first question. How in the world do we get in? Because here's the thing. Statistics show us that 70% of people believe that there is an afterlife, a heaven of some sort, about 70%. And so out of that 70%, I'm gonna say in this room, that's probably an even larger percentage. We're probably the majority in that 70%, but not total, maybe 90, 95% are in that group. And the majority of the people who are interviewed say that they believe that what you do is what will impact whether or not you get into heaven. That doing equals what you're gonna get in or don't get in. So in other words, it kind of feels like this to me. We're gonna make a list of everything that we have ever done good, and we're gonna make a list of everything that we've ever done bad, and if that list weights towards good, then you're in. So in other words, that's what determines if I'm a good person. Does my good outweigh my bad? And that's what will determine if it's good enough. I'm good enough to get in because I've checked those boxes. Well, I thought, let's just see how we're doing. So let's put a scale on the screen here, a scale of 1 to 10. We're gonna do some rating right here in the room. Scale of 1 to 10. I want you to start thinking about where are you on this scale? If you were saying that you're a good person, how good are you? Let's just say that 9 is Mother Teresa. She had a bad thought once, so she dropped. Because you're saying 10, she's not perfect, right? And let's go all the way down here to 1, and we'll say that's Hitler. I know some of you are going, he's a 0. No, he saved a cat once. It was in a tree or something. So he's there. Where are you at on that scale? So here's what's funny. I have the ability to do mind reading. I know what you picked. The majority of the people in this room, I bet. Did you pick yours already? Did everybody get it? Everybody's got your number, right? The majority of the people said 6. I would ask, but that would be a little weird, right? Because some of y'all are not gonna raise your hand. I'm gonna say, yeah, I know. You're not. The reason is because we're not, we're better than average. We're a little better than average. And just so you know, I'm on here too. I'm a 3 right here. Yep. Now, it was funny. I started out this morning as a 4, and I was telling my wife about it, and she said, no, you're definitely a 3. And I'm like, trying to explain to her the scale. I said, but Hitler's like a 1. She says, oh, well, then you're a 2. So we settled for 3. That's what I put up here. No, she didn't say that. She said solid 3, solid. So that's the scale of 1 to 10. And where are you out in that scale? And I think the reason we do 6 is that we're a little better than the average guy. We're not doing great. We're not perfect, which is always the funny thing because one of my favorite phrases that people say all the time is, well, nobody's perfect. And that's why it's okay to be on this scale. But here's the problem. The scorecard mentality, when you start doing this, it's all about the determination of where you are on the scale. It's always comparative, isn't it? It's not based on what you really are. You're comparing yourself to other people to determine what you are on that scale. Because we don't even know what the standard is. So I'm not perfect, but I'm not a bad guy. And here's what I've always noticed. When you start doing the comparison scale, it doesn't work because there's always somebody worse than you. Doesn't matter what you've done. If you're a liar, you go, well, I'm not a thief. And if you're a thief, it's like, well, I've never killed nobody. And if you killed somebody, it's like, I've only killed 1 person. And the guy who killed 2 or 3 with an axe, and he's like, hey, relax. I'm not a serial killer. And even a serial killer's like, well, I'm not Hitler. There's always somebody worse than you, so no matter what the situation is, you can always say, well, I'm not that bad. I'm not like that bad. So the scale's kind of messed up. So how good is good enough? Is it a 5? Is it a 6? Is it a 4? The problem is we don't even know what the standard is. So what's the standard? What's the standard by which we're going to measure if we are good enough? Now, we good church people, you know what we do? We'll go to the Bible. We want to talk about the Bible, what the Bible says. Here's the problem. Jesus himself apparently didn't get the memo about goodness, because Jesus implies all throughout his time here that bad people go to heaven, not good people. I know it's going to rock some of your worlds, some of your religious pillars that you built is getting crushed. I'm going to prove it to you. It's not like I'm just pulling this out of nowhere. So you remember when Jesus is on the cross? Luke 23. So on the cross, he has 2 people on both sides of him. You with me so far? The one guy says, well, this is Jesus. Hey, look, dude, you're like supposed to be like a healer or something. You're supposed to be able to do like miracles. Why don't you just get us off the cross? Just summon whatever and let's get out from here. The other guy, who's a thief, says, hey man, relax. This is Jesus here. He's a good guy. He's great. He didn't do anything wrong. Me and you, we're losers. We deserve to be here. We should die for what we have done. And then he looks at Jesus and he says, Jesus, will you remember me in heaven? No, of course not, you moron. You're a terrible person. The scale has been tilted. You're a 3. You don't get in. That's what you should have said, right? Because he's a bad person. Bad people, the ones that go to hell. But then Jesus says in 43 of chapter 23, he looks at the guy and he says to him, truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. I mean, the guy doesn't even have time to go do anything good. I mean, he's done. It's over. He didn't even get in the baptismal pool. He didn't get wet. How does he get in? It doesn't make any sense, but that's what Jesus says. As a matter of fact, let me just tell you this. The Bible is actually not a book about how to be good, how to be a good person. That's the biggest shock for people. We think, well, you read the Bible so I can learn how to be a better person. No, you can't. You're not going to be a good person. We're not good people. The whole Bible is showing you that you're not good, you're not capable of being good, and you'll never be good, and so something has to step in or you are in trouble. I know, it's just weird, isn't it? It feels uncomfortable even hearing it. The Bible, in other words, God never says that good equals heaven. Never. We're struggling a little bit, so let's keep going while we're now knee deep in it here. Stay with me for a second. Paul steps in. So Paul's writing a letter to the Corinthians. It's actually his second letter to the Corinthians. And in that letter, he describes himself. He talks about himself. So let me tell you about Paul. Paul was a Pharisee. He was a religious leader with the Jewish people. And in the Old Testament, the way that it worked was, the teaching is, you have to be good and perfect, right, to go to heaven. Since you can't be good and perfect, you would go do sacrifices and make payments for your badness, and then that would correct you and make you good. But it didn't really matter, because no matter how good you were, no matter what you did, even from the point that you were made right by some sacrifice, as you walked away, you would mess up and be in trouble again, and you hadn't even made this sacrifice, so you're doomed again. Well, Paul was different. Paul was like the best of the best. He knew all the law. He knew all the rules. He was a religious leader. He checked all the boxes. I mean, he describes himself as this amazing person. Everybody describes him as this amazing leader who, if anybody was good enough, it's Paul. Paul should be getting in, right? He's solid. But you know what Paul says about himself? He said, in light of Jesus, he tells us who he was. And he says this, he says, I am the chief of sinners. So on our scales here, earthly scales, he's the top. He has an experience with Jesus and he realizes, man, I'm the chief of sinners. He writes in Romans, 2 different texts. In Romans chapter 3, verse 10, he says, no one is righteous. No, not one person is righteous. In Romans chapter 3, verse 23, he says, for all have sinned, everybody has sinned, and they fall short of God's glory. So he's putting out this thing that according to Paul, no one is good enough. Not even himself, he's not good enough. So how good is good enough? So what is that standard? So how good is good enough? You know what Paul says? Jesus. Jesus is the standard. He's the line. You remember our scale, the 1 to 10 scale? On that scale, he's 10, and heaven begins at 10 with him. He's 10. He's the only 10. He's it. He is the standard by which we draw it. Paul says this, nobody's able, it's only him, and we'll talk about it here. I'm going to read that 2 Corinthians 6 in 1 second. But Jesus steps in his own words. He copies, mimics what Paul's saying. He says the same thing. So either one, Jesus is a liar and he's crazy. I mean, like crazy, because if he's not the way, here's what he says in John 14:6. You ready for this? Jesus says, I'm the way, I'm the truth, and the life. That's not enough. He takes it one step further. He makes it very clear. No one. Nobody is coming to the Father except through me. I'm a 10. I'm 10. Me. I'm it. So if Jesus is lying, if Jesus is not the way, then he's not somebody we should admire. It's somebody we should go, that dude is crazy. He's saying he's the one. So again, how do we get into heaven? There's that question again. How do we get in? Well, Paul wants to join in. He wants to have it. That text I was talking about in 2 Corinthians, let's finally read it. I actually want to kind of break it down a little bit for you. So in 2 Corinthians, take a look. Let's put it up here on the screen. This is verse 21. Let's just break this down a little bit. So first of all, for our sake, he made him to be sin, who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So it starts out with for our sake, for our sake. So he looks at us and he realizes we don't meet the standard. Our innate goodness is flawed. You know, whatever it is, I think if we're all honest, we look at all of the last 20 years as evidence enough that man left to their own devices will mess it up. We make poor choices, the best of us. And sometimes it's maybe trying to be good, whatever, but that's it. So because of that, for our sake, we're messed up. We're going to be separated from God for all of eternity. It's hopeless. Because of that situation, for our sake, God then steps in and he makes him to be sin. So God steps into the picture. Because of our sake, God steps in. He sends Jesus to be sin. So going back to that cross thing, Jesus on the cross, he's taken on that sin. So he takes on, and he himself is what? He knew no sin. He's without sin. So here's a guy without sin, takes on our sin for our sake. That was his purpose. Why? The so that. That's always an important phrase if you read that in Scripture. So that. So all of this, God steps in for our sake, sends Jesus who knew no sin to be sin, so that in him, so now in him, if we embrace him, which is that important, in him we, that's the key word, if we embrace him, us embracing him, following him, understanding who he is, and he then lives in us, then we might become the what? Y'all still asleep? What is that word? We can read. It's a big word. It's righteousness. The reason I'm wanting you to say that, I want you to think about this. Because of our messed upness, God steps in. Jesus becomes sin, didn't know sin, so that if we're in him, we have the ability to become righteous. Let me help you. We are able to become 10. What he did, he's the standard. And what he did, if we embrace him, we become 10. We're now able, not because of what we've done, but because of what he has done. So here's what you need to know. This is important. Forgiven people go to heaven, not good people. This isn't a race to the top so who can be the best, who's gonna cross. You can't be good enough. That's why Jesus steps in. He says, I know you can't. I'll do it for you. All that is required is that we embrace him and he forgives us. So let's go back to the cross. Luke 23. Jesus is in the cross. In verse 34, he talks about this. He's looking out at us and all that we've done, and he says this to the Father. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus does the craziest thing when he's on the cross. He says, Father, forgive them. They are wrong. Let's be honest. Can we all be honest for a second? Nobody put themselves as a 10 that is even remotely sane. Nobody would put themselves as a 10. He not only knows you're wrong, he knows that you know that you're wrong. I mean, it's like we know. He knows that you deserve death. He's got it. We deserve to die. We do not deserve his forgiveness. We do not deserve to be in eternity with him if we're honest, if we're completely honest. And you know what he still decides to do? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Forgive them. Listen, that is grace. And grace is when you get something that you don't deserve. He shows you mercy, and mercy is not getting what you deserve. And my friends, that is good news. If you are like me, you know that is good news. And yes, we should applaud. That one person is like, I get it. I'm a loser. I'm a 2. So let's talk about that 2 for a second. Once you realize that you're not a 10, right? Once you start, some of us go through this thing where you start realizing who you are. You make some poor choices, whatever it is. Your life's not where you thought it would be. And then you start the scale thing. You go back to the scale, right? And on the scale, you start saying, okay, if Jesus is a 10, I got that. Well, I'm a 2. Then you start working really, really hard to do enough good things to cover that gap. And the further back you are, the more hard work you feel like you have to do. And some of us have even concluded when you're like a 3 or a 2, you start concluding it is completely hopeless. I can never do enough good deeds to catch up with what I've done. And so you start feeling hopeless. You start losing it as you start struggling, trying to figure out how in the world am I ever going to be there? How am I ever going to do that? But here's what I want you to learn from what Jesus did on the cross. What Jesus did on the cross, here's what you need to understand. Jesus on the cross does not say do. On the cross, he says done. Many of us are stuck with do. We're working. We're struggling. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I didn't do that. I should have done this. You don't know where I've been. You don't know my story. You don't know who I've been around. You don't know who I've hurt. You don't know where I've come from. And Jesus says, done. Paid. So according to Jesus, who gets in heaven? Those people who believe and trust in him and follow him. He makes them right. Now, that's the first question. Let me close with the second question. Second question was, why do I even want to go to heaven? Why does it even matter what I think about heaven or how I pursue heaven or how I approach heaven? What does that even matter? Maybe there's another way. Let me tell you this, and here's why I think it's important. Your perspective of heaven impacts how you're going to live your entire life here on earth. My perspective drives my behavior while I'm here. Now, let me explain. For many of us, if you think about it, when you're younger, like as soon as you're in middle school and those hormones kick in, you think that the meaning of life is the opposite sex. You start immediately, I gotta have a boyfriend, gotta have a girlfriend. You know, all the triggers kick off. And so all of life now is about, I have to find somebody who will like me. And for some of us, that is a big deal. I'm not gonna lie to you, I've seen you. And I get it. It's a lot of work. But as you get older, it becomes several things start to creep in as time goes on. Who's gonna marry me? And you start working towards that, all of that. It's all about courtship and that marriage is gonna be the solution to all things. No, it's now a kid. We gotta have a kid. They're gonna bring meaning and purpose. And then all while that's going on, you got another thing going on. What is it? It's like, what am I gonna do with my life? What's my career gonna be? Where am I gonna work all the time? And all of life starts driving. So now when that becomes my perspective, when my perspective is I need a good job, I need a good paying job, I need a career, I need to make money, I need to marry the right person, I gotta have the right kids and the right school. All of a sudden, all of my energy is working towards these things. It drives everything. And then things kick in like retirement. We're now like, this life sucks, I gotta get out of this and I've gotta retire. And so now everything becomes about retirement. Some of us, we're working jobs not because we care about the jobs. We're like, no, I want to do my hobbies, whether it's fishing or playing sports or being a part of whatever. So I go to work so I can go do my other things, and that becomes what drives me. And then some of us, all we care about is that one vacation at the end of the year. We get our week or 2 weeks off, and we're going to Cancun. And all year long, we work and suffer to go have that one good experience in Cancun. We work, we invest, we do all of this stuff working towards it. And I don't know if you're like me, but you've realized really quick that it's empty. No matter how many times you check a box or do another layer, it's like, yeah, and maybe it's good. You say, it was good, I like that. But there's something missing from every step along the way. Colossians chapter 3, 1 and 2. Notice what it says. Verse 1. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Look at verse 2. Set your what? Set your minds on things that are above. Check it out. Not on things that are on earth. Let me pull it together for you. I know this may be a struggle for you. Here's what it's saying. Because your thinking is, then nothing here matters. All I need to do is just work towards heaven. I just got to think about Jesus every day. I got to do a worship song. Got to do this. Got to do. None of this matters. It's not what he's saying. It's not what he's saying. Set your mind on eternity. Set your mind there. And then that will guide your steps here. Listen, I'm not pursuing relationships because they're the end to relationships. I don't pursue marriage because marriage is the end of all things. I don't pursue a job or a career. No, all of those things I pursue in light of who God is in eternity. All of those things have their meaning and purpose in eternity. So in other words, now I don't approach a relationship out of, man, they're hot. Man, look what they bring to the table. I bet he makes a lot of money. I now look at it in perspective of who God is in all of eternity. I want my relationships to line up with who he is and where I'm going. I want my career to be about who he is and where he's going. My hobbies and interests are shaped with eternity. Because think about this with me. Every single one of us find those moments in life, whether you go through at the 40 years, your whole midlife crisis, or you reach a point where you've done this job a while and you realize that something is still missing. It's because we put our minds on earthly things that are just temporary. They have no meaning and purpose. Life Full life is only found in him. Matthew chapter 6, verse 10, in this prayer when Jesus is teaching us to pray. You know what he says in that prayer? He teaches us to pray this. He says, when you pray, pray this. Your kingdom come. Your kingdom come. Heaven on earth. God, I pray that we would experience heaven here on earth. God, help us to make decisions in light of who you are and what you want us to do right here, right now. And that's why you need to know this. Heaven starts right now. It's not something that you just simply aspire to and wait for. You start living it. According to Jesus, you can experience some of the elements of heaven right now. How? Follow me. You can experience love, kindness, grace, forgiveness, peace, all of these things that are going to be in heaven. You can experience them now by the choices that you make and the decisions that you make and the relationships that you have, where you work, where you play, your activities, where you go, how you treat other people, the decisions you make. You're going to learn to let things go and stop trying to win an argument and start trying to win people's hearts. A change of mindset. We stop caring about politics because why? Politics is temporary and God is eternal. That's all I care about. I don't care who the next president is. I care who's sitting on the throne. That's what drives my decisions. I stop wasting all of this energy that we're wasting on it. Heaven starts right now. So when you're a kid, I don't know if you're like me. I'm older, so I'm gonna go ahead and confess this. Back in the day, you get $1. They say, hey, here's $1, go get you something at the dime store. Now, if you're old, you know what a dime store is. How many old people know what a dime store is? Talk to me. All right, so back in the day, there was what was called a dime store. You could take $1, you can go buy stuff. Today, we got Dollar General, and it's all crap. That's all I got to say. You can take $1 in there, but you're not coming out with anything. So that's what you do, right? You get the money, you get to do it. And then when you were a kid, back in my day, because I know, especially here in Fort Millionaire, you get $100 back then, you'd be like, holy cow. I never, when I was a kid, I'd never seen $100. So I got a little coinage up here. I got $100, I ain't gonna lie to you. I got some more in my pocket. Put that up here, just so y'all know that, I made it. I made it. I'm put all those $1 bills right there, big wad. $100, you get $100 and you'd be looking at it going, that's $100. What could I buy with $100? So as a kid, you start thinking about all the possibilities, right? And then you'd get so excited about it, you'd want to go do, whatever. Now I know some of you guys, maybe it's $1,000. Man, $1,000, that'd be nice. If you could do whatever you wanted to with it. Because our tendency as you get older, it's like, I got to pay that bill, I got that debt. Let's pretend none of that exists. I'm giving you $10,000. What can you do with $10,000? Maybe it's $1 million. Y'all remember back when the lottery hit $1 billion? $1 billion. Man, I remember it hit, and I had this one weirdo I was talking to, and I was like, man, well, $1 billion, that's a lot of money. He goes, yeah, but you give half of it to the government. Well, 500 million sounds like a lot of money to me. I don't know where you come from. Maybe that's not a lot. I'll take the $500 million. $1 billion. How many of you guys, seriously, tell me the truth. I want you to raise your hand. How many of you guys, when you started talking about $1 billion, you started talking about, man, if we won $1 billion, because I know you played the lottery, don't lie, I did it, I bought a ticket. How many of y'all bought a ticket to the billion? Some of you just are hopeless, right? Like, I don't even want to try. It's $1, man, relax. Or $2. Anyway, not that I would know that. Anyway, you play that, and how many of you had the conversation like, what if we won? And you start talking about what would we buy? What would we do? Where would we go? What would we live? And you start thinking stupid stuff like, I'm gonna get a jet. I'm gonna buy a house. Dumb stuff, right? We start thinking about that $1 billion, man, and it changes our perspective for a second, right? So here's what's funny. When you think about eternity, when you think about heaven, when you have eternity in mind, what happens when you believe in Jesus and you trust him and he transforms your heart and he is now in you and you are in him, you have just won the multi-trillion dollar golden ticket. The multi-trillion dollar ticket. And my question to you, if you're thinking about that $1 billion, if you had $1 billion, what's $100 to you? Nothing. you're just throwing it away. You don't even care. It's like it's just $100. When you have won the multi-trillion-dollar golden ticket to eternity, what is 100 years to you? What does it even matter, right? It's like it's 100 years. If I have all of eternity, then I can easily lay down my 100 years. God, it's yours. I'm giving you 100 for a trillion. God, I want to walk with you. I want to be who you want me to be, where I work, where I live, where I play. Knowing what eternity is transforms everything. The question is this, do you believe? Have you believed and placed your trust in Jesus? It starts there, it's the craziest thing. We check a box to go to heaven. It's like I don't want to go to hell, so we check a box. We say a simple prayer. We do a flippant baptism. I'm not asking you about that. I'm talking about, do you believe in him? Because if you believe in him, then you will live for him. You will have this eternal mindset. Because I believe in him, I can live today as though there is an eternity. It's transformative. This morning, that's what I'm going to pray for you. That's what I want to pray over you. I want you to think about this. We're going to close with a song and allow us just kind of sit in this and worship. Would you take a second? Let's pray together. Father God, in this room, would you move? Would you speak? And God, maybe for some of us in here today, it begins with belief in you. Some of us today, we have not placed our faith in you. We have not crossed that line. We have not made a decision. God, would you move in this room? For some of us, we need to take that step. Maybe for the very first time. And some of us, we have been in church and we have played church and we have walked through the motions, but we have not trusted you to the point that has transformed who we are and we're living like you. So God, move in this room today. We pray in the name of Christ.